My dad gave my sister everything. Then the lawyer pulled out Grandpa's secret will, and her fake smile shattered when I got it all. Please stay with me as I tell my story. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and sharing your loved one. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. Poke. My dad gave my sister everything. The cars, the house, even the family business. I thought I was left with nothing, until the lawyer pulled out Grandpa's secret will, and her fake smile shattered when I got it all. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Ethan Miller, and growing up in my house was like living in two different worlds under the same roof. My sister Amanda was treated like royalty. She never had to lift a finger, never had to worry about money, and never faced consequences for her actions. My father, Richard Miller, adored her to the point of blindness. He gave her new cars for her birthdays, expensive clothes whenever she wanted, and even handed her the keys to his business before she finished college. To him, Amanda could do no wrong. Then there was me. I worked late nights in the grocery store just to cover my school expenses. I fixed my own beat-up car because asking Dad for help only earned me a lecture about how I needed to work harder if I wanted something. Every accomplishment I achieved, whether it was graduating high school with honors or getting into college, was brushed off. He would glance at me, nod, and then brag about Amanda's latest shopping spree or her shallow achievement. It was like no matter what I did, I could never be good enough in his eyes. I won't lie, it hurt. There were nights when I lay awake wondering what I had done to deserve being invisible to my own father. Sometimes, it felt like the only role I had in that family was to stand in the background while Amanda soaked up all the love and attention. My mother, Margaret, tried to be kind to me. She slipped me extra food, reminded me that she was proud, and gave me small pieces of comfort. But even her voice was drowned out by Dad's overpowering favoritism. Amanda knew she was the favorite. She rubbed it in my face whenever she had the chance. She would dangle the keys to her new car in front of me, smirking as I drove off in my rusty old truck. She called me the spare more than once, reminding me that she was the heir, and I was just there to make up the numbers. Her arrogance only grew as Dad continued to hand her everything on a silver platter. Through it all, I kept my head down. I worked hard, stayed quiet, and reminded myself that life wasn't fair. But deep inside, I longed for the day when the truth would come out. I didn't know it then, but that day was much closer than I could ever imagine. Amanda grew up knowing that the world would bend for her. She didn't have to ask twice for anything, and she quickly learned how to twist situations to her advantage. If she wanted to go out, Dad gave her cash without hesitation. If she messed up in school, he blamed the teacher instead of her. Over time, she became sharper with her words, quick to manipulate, and always ready to point fingers at others when things didn't go her way. I saw her master the art of charm early on. Around neighbors or relatives, Amanda would act sweet and innocent, painting herself as the golden child. Behind closed doors, though, she was demanding and dismissive. If I left my books on the table, she complained I was messy. If I worked late and came home tired, she mocked me for acting poor. And Dad laughed along with her, treating her little digs as jokes instead of insults. While Amanda enjoyed her easy life, I carried a very different weight. I balanced my studies with part-time jobs, stocking shelves, delivering food, sometimes even doing yard work for strangers. Every paycheck was stretched thin between tuition, books, and basic needs. There was no safety net for me. I knew if I failed, there would be no one waiting to catch me. That thought pushed me to keep going, even when I was exhausted. Dad never seemed impressed. Whenever I shared a small victory, like earning good grades or managing to pay another semester of tuition on my own, he would brush it aside with cold words. "That's what you're supposed to do," he'd say, before turning the conversation back to Amanda's latest outing or new plan. Sometimes he would look at me directly and say, "You'll never measure up to your sister." The words stayed with me, cutting deeper than he probably realized. Amanda soaked in his approval, her pride growing bigger every year. She didn't hide her gloating either. If Dad praised her in front of family, she'd give me a sideways glance, as if to remind me where I stood. It was clear, one of us was always celebrated, the other was always compared. Through all of this, my mother tried to shield me from the sting of rejection. Margaret had a gentle way of pulling me aside, telling me she admired my persistence. She saw the effort I put in, even when no one else cared. Sometimes she slipped a little encouragement when she thought Dad wasn't listening. "Keep going, Ethan," she whispered once. "You're stronger than they know." Her words mattered, but her presence in the household wasn't enough to drown out the constant imbalance. Every dinner table conversation was tilted in Amanda's favor. Every family decision was made with her, and every reminder from Dad that I wasn't enough settled deeper into me. Resentment built quietly inside, though I never let it show. I swallowed it, telling myself to endure. I thought that was the only way forward, but deep down, I wondered how long I could keep pretending it didn't affect me. Grandpa Henry became the one person who truly understood me. He didn't see me as a shadow or a disappointment. To him, I was simply Ethan, a young man trying to build a life with honesty and hard work. Whenever I visited him, the weight I carried at home seemed to lift a little. Henry lived in a modest house on the edge of town. He wasn't flashy, and he didn't care for showing off. He found joy in the little things, fixing something with his hands, tending to his garden, or sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee. Whenever I showed up, he welcomed me with a smile that felt genuine, the kind of smile I never saw from my father. We spent hours in his garage, tinkering with old cars. He loved teaching me how engines worked, how patience and attention to detail mattered more than rushing through a job. "Take your time, Ethan," he would say, wiping the grease from his hands. "If you rush, you miss what's important. Life's the same way." Those words stuck with me. He never lectured or compared me to anyone else. He guided me without judgment. I never asked him for money, even though I struggled. What I wanted from him wasn't financial help. It was wisdom, direction, and someone to believe in me. He gave that freely. Sometimes, after a long afternoon of fixing up an old pickup, we would sit on the porch while the sun went down. He'd share stories about his younger days, the mistakes he made, and the lessons he learned. Listening to him made me feel like maybe I wasn't so alone. Amanda rarely showed up. She didn't see the value in spending time with Henry. If Dad wasn't around, she acted like there was no reason to be. She preferred shopping, parties, or bragging about her life to friends. To her, Henry's world was small and unimportant. On the rare occasions she visited, she barely spoke to him, often glued to her phone or rushing through the visit. Henry noticed, but he never complained. He treated her kindly, though I could see the disappointment in his eyes. In those quiet moments with him, I realized something important. Henry didn't care about wealth or appearances. What mattered to him was character, and he made it clear he respected mine. For the first time, I felt truly valued by someone in my family. His words reminded me that even though my father ignored me, I wasn't worthless. I left his house after every visit feeling stronger, as though I had been reminded of my worth. Henry never had to say much to make me believe in myself. His presence alone was enough. Spending time with him wasn't just comfort. It was the foundation that helped me stand when everything else in my life felt unsteady. The call came on a quiet morning. Grandpa Henry had passed in his sleep. For a long moment, I just sat there holding the phone, unable to believe the words. He had been the one steady presence in my life, the person who gave me guidance when I felt lost. Now he was gone, and the world suddenly felt heavier. The day of the funeral was gray, fitting for the mood that hung over me. I arrived early, sitting in the back pew with my hands folded, trying to keep myself together. The air smelled faintly of flowers, though it didn't mask the sharp ache inside me. I didn't want to talk much. I just wanted to remember him in peace. Amanda came late, making an entrance as if it were a fashion show instead of a funeral. She wore a black dress that sparkled with sequins, heels clicking loudly as she walked. Her makeup was perfect, her jewelry expensive, and she carried herself like the star of the day. Instead of moving quietly and showing respect, she made sure every eye was on her. I could hear whispers among the guests, some impressed, some uncomfortable. Amanda seemed to thrive on the attention. As people spoke about Grandpa, Amanda kept interrupting conversations, telling everyone how much Grandpa adored her. She bragged about little stories, twisting them so she appeared as his favorite. To anyone listening, it sounded like she was the center of his world. I sat silently, my chest tight, knowing how far from the truth that was. But I didn't argue. This wasn't the time. Dad, as usual, praised Amanda at every turn. He told relatives how proud Grandpa had been of her, how she carried herself with such grace. He hardly looked in my direction. When a cousin asked how I was doing, Dad cut in before I could answer, talking instead about Amanda's achievement. It was as if I didn't exist in that room. I sat there, staring at the polished casket, listening to them speak. Memories of afternoons in Grandpa's garage flashed in my mind, his voice, his steady hands, his patience. None of that was mentioned. To the crowd, Amanda had been his golden girl, and I was left in the shadows once again. During the burial, Amanda stood near the front, dabbing her eyes with a tissue in a dramatic display. People nodded sympathetically, while I kept my grief quiet. The truth was, my pain ran deeper than hers ever could, but I didn't feel the need to prove it. My love for Grandpa didn't need a performance. Still, as I watched the casket lower into the ground, a sharp thought cut through me. When it came time to settle his affairs, Amanda would get everything. She had always gotten it all. Why would this be any different? I clenched my fists, swallowing the bitterness. I wasn't angry at Grandpa. I knew he loved me. But I couldn't shake the belief that, once again, Amanda would walk away with everything, and I would be left behind with nothing but memories. Weeks passed after the funeral, and the sadness still sat heavy in my chest. Then came the day we were called to meet at Mr. Collins' office, the lawyer who had handled Grandpa's affairs. I didn't expect much from it. In my mind, Amanda would get everything, just like always. I went because it was my duty, not because I believed my life would change. The office was quiet, the kind of place where even the ticking of a clock felt loud. Shelves of books lined the walls, and the smell of old paper filled the room. I sat near the back, hands resting on my knees, keeping my thoughts to myself. Amanda walked in with a smirk stretched across her face, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. She carried herself as if she already owned the building. Her dress was sharp, her jewelry sparkling, and her confidence so strong it nearly filled the room. She leaned against the chair beside her and whispered to Dad, "This won't take long." Richard leaned close to her, patting her hand. "Don't worry, Princess, it's all yours anyway," he said with certainty. His voice carried, and I knew he didn't care if I heard. It was the same message I had been given my entire life. Amanda first, me forgotten. I kept my eyes down, staring at the floor. A part of me still hoped Grandpa had remembered me in some small way, maybe a letter or something personal, but I didn't dare expect more. It was easier to prepare for nothing than to let myself hope. Mr. Collins entered, holding a thick folder. He was a tall man with silver hair and a calm presence that made everyone quiet. He asked us to take our seats, then opened the file and adjusted his glasses. "Thank you for coming today," he began. "We are here to read the last will and testament of Henry Miller." Amanda straightened up, crossing her legs with elegance, ready to hear her name called again and again. She already had plans in her head, what she would sell, what she would keep, and how she would boast about her new fortune. Her smugness made my stomach tighten, but I stayed still. Mr. Collins read through the formalities first, his voice steady as he listed basic instructions and acknowledgement. Amanda looked almost bored, like she was just waiting for the part where everything was handed over to her. Dad sat proudly beside her, a faint smile on his face, convinced this was nothing more than a routine formality. I sat silently, hardly breathing, preparing myself for the moment I would once again be invisible. The only sound was the lawyer's voice and the shuffle of papers. I folded my hands tighter, bracing for disappointment, not knowing that what came next would turn the entire room upside down. Mr. Collins began reading the will in his steady voice, moving carefully through each line. The first part was simple, small items given to different relatives. A watch to an uncle, a set of tools to a cousin, and some old photographs to my mother. These were pieces of Grandpa's life, passed on with care. I listened quietly, taking in the thought behind each choice. Amanda sat tall, her chin lifted with that smug smile she always wore. Every small item that went to someone else didn't bother her. She was waiting for the real moment, the part where the properties, the money, and the business would come her way. I could almost hear her thoughts, already planning what to do with it all. Her confidence was unshaken, her pride written across her face. Dad sat beside her, calm and certain. His hand rested on Amanda's arm like a reminder that she was the chosen one. He didn't look at me once. For him, this was only confirmation of what he always believed, that Amanda was destined to have it all, while I would be left with nothing. Then Mr. Collins paused. He set down the first stack of papers and pulled out another envelope from the folder. He looked up at all of us, his eyes serious. The room grew quiet, the air heavy. I felt something shift, though I didn't know what it meant. "There is another document," he said slowly. His words cut through the silence like a knife. A separate will, written and signed by Mr. Henry Miller only a few months before his passing. Amanda's smile froze. She tilted her head, trying to keep her expression calm, but her eyes betrayed her. For the first time that day, she didn't look certain. Dad leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Another will?" he asked, his tone sharp, almost demanding. Mr. Collins nodded. "Yes." Mr. Miller made changes privately. He explained his reasons in detail, and this document has been verified and properly witnessed. It holds full legal weight. The room went silent again, so quiet that I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Amanda shifted in her seat, her fingers tightening around the edge of the chair. Her fake confidence slipped, replaced by unease she couldn't hide. I sat frozen, unsure what to think. Part of me wondered if this was just another technicality, something small that wouldn't change anything. But the way Amanda's smile cracked told me this wasn't something she had expected. Mr. Collins carefully unfolded the new papers, his voice steady, but carrying a weight that filled the room. The sound of each word seemed louder than the last, as if the walls themselves leaned in to listen. Amanda glanced at Dad, her face pale now. For once, there was no smirk, no mocking look thrown my way. Only silence, broken by the lawyer's voice as he prepared to reveal what Henry had truly decided. Mr. Collins cleared his throat before reading from the second. His tone was steady, but his words carried a weight that pressed down on everyone in the room. In this final document, he began, Henry Miller expressed his true wishes for how his estate and assets should be handled. He wrote that he had grown disappointed in the favoritism shown by his son, Richard, and in the entitled behavior it created in his granddaughter, Amanda. The words landed like heavy stones. Amanda's mouth fell open. Dad shifted in his seat, his face suddenly tight with unease. I sat still, my hands gripping the chair, hardly believing what I was hearing. Mr. Collins continued. Henry Miller stated that while he loved his family, he could not ignore what he saw. He valued humility, fairness, and hard work above all. For that reason, he leaves the family estate, the savings accounts, and the controlling shares of the Miller business to his grandson, Ethan Miller. The air in the room turned electric. Amanda's face turned red, her eyes wide with shock. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out at first. Dad leaned back in his chair, the color draining from his face. He looked as though the ground beneath him had suddenly shifted. I sat frozen, unable to move. My heart pounded in my chest as if it was trying to break free. I had expected nothing, prepared myself to be invisible again. Now I was hearing that Grandpa had left everything to me. It didn't feel real. Mr. Collins wasn't finished. As for Amanda Miller, he said firmly, her grandfather wished for her to receive only a single item, a locket that belonged to her grandmother. His note explained that he hoped this small gift would remind her of humility, love, and the importance of family. Amanda exploded. What? She screamed, slamming her hand on the desk. That's impossible. Grandpa adored me. He wouldn't do this. Her voice shook the walls, high-pitched with rage. Mr. Collins stayed calm, sliding the signed pages across the desk. This will was prepared carefully, with witnesses. It is fully valid. Amanda's fury only grew. She stood from her chair, pointing at me as if I were the one who had written it. You must have tricked him. This is your fault. Her words were sharp, almost desperate, but I couldn't answer. I was still too stunned, sitting in silence, my thoughts racing. Dad looked at me then, his eyes filled with something I had never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment, but fear. For the first time in my life, he seemed powerless. His control was slipping, and he knew it. I didn't celebrate, didn't smile. I just sat there in shock, struggling to understand how everything had changed in the span of a few minutes. Grandpa had seen me, truly seen me, and left me with more than I ever thought possible. The days after the will was read were filled with tension that seemed to follow me everywhere. Amanda refused to accept what she had heard in that office. She stormed around the house, her voice sharp and bitter, throwing accusations at me whenever we crossed paths. You manipulated him, she shouted one evening, her face twisted in anger. You poisoned his mind against me. There's no other explanation. Her words cut through the air, but I didn't answer. I knew nothing I said would calm her. She didn't want truth. She wanted someone to blame. Richard tried to calm her, but his attempts only fueled her fire. Dad, you have to fix this, she pleaded, gripping his arm. You can't let him take everything. Contest it. Fight it in court. I overheard them more than once, Amanda pushing, Richard pacing. But even he knew the will was airtight. Grandpa had planned carefully. Every page was signed, every witness verified. Still, Amanda wouldn't let go. She clung to the idea that if she yelled loud enough, if she demanded hard enough, something would change. Behind closed doors, she came to me with a different face. Instead of rage, she tried a softer tone. One night she cornered me in the hallway, her eyes glassy, her voice trembling. Ethan, listen, we're family. You don't really want to take it all, do you? Share it with me. Just half. That's fair. Her words hung heavy, but I remembered too much. I remembered years of being mocked, of being called the spare, of watching her flaunt everything while I worked for scraps. I remembered my father's cold words, the constant dismissal, the pain of being invisible. Now here she was, desperate, trying to tug at bonds she had spent years tearing apart. You don't deserve it, she whispered, her voice growing harsher. You never did. Grandpa was old, confused. He didn't know what he was doing, but he had known exactly what he was doing. I saw it clearly now. He had seen through her act, through Dad's favoritism, and he had chosen me, not out of pity, but out of trust. I'm not giving you anything, I said quietly, my voice steady in a way it had never been before. The look on her face shifted from pleading to rage in an instant. For the first time in my life, the balance between us had shifted. Amanda wasn't the untouchable golden child anymore. She was the one begging, the one lashing out, the one desperate to hold on to power she no longer had. And I was no longer the quiet shadow in the corner. I didn't need to raise my voice, didn't need to fight. Simply standing firm was enough. Richard and Amanda didn't give up easily. Within a week of the will being read, they marched into Mr. Collins' office demanding answers, their voices loud and full of anger. When that didn't work, they took the fight to court. They were sure they could undo Grandpa's decision, convinced they just needed the right lawyer to prove I had somehow twisted his mind. But Grandpa had been careful. Every page of the will was backed by signed statements. Witnesses confirmed his words, and there was even a video recording of him explaining why he made the changes. In that video, Grandpa spoke clearly, his voice strong, leaving no doubt about his state of mind. "I want Ethan to have what I built," he said. "He has worked hard for everything in his life. He never asked for favors. That's the kind of man who should carry the family name forward." When the video played in court, Amanda's face turned red with fury. Richard sat pale and silent, knowing there was nothing left to argue. Their lawyers tried, but each point was shut down by the evidence. The judge ruled in my favor without hesitation. Word spread quickly in the community. For years, everyone had believed Amanda was the golden child, the one destined to inherit everything. They had seen Richard parade her around, praising her while ignoring me. But now the truth came out, and people began to see things differently. Neighbors who had once overlooked me stopped to shake my hand, telling me Grandpa had chosen well. Some even admitted they had always admired how I carried myself despite being treated unfairly. Amanda's friends started drifting away. At first, she tried to keep up appearances, bragging that she would appeal the decision. But as time went on, her bitterness showed through. The more she complained, the more people turned away. They were tired of her arrogance, tired of her constant need to be on top. Slowly, the crowd she once surrounded herself with disappeared, leaving her standing alone. I didn't go out of my way to punish her. I didn't need to. The more she fought, the more she exposed who she really was. Her greed spoke louder than anything I could have said. The same went for Dad. His pride, once so strong, crumbled when he realized the business and estate were no longer his to control. For a man who built his identity around power, the loss was crushing. I lived my life quietly, just as I always had. I worked, I managed the responsibilities Grandpa had left me, and I carried his lessons with me. I didn't chase revenge, but it came anyway, shaped not by my hands, but by their own actions. In the end, their downfall wasn't caused by me. It was the weight of their own arrogance finally pulling them down. The months that followed felt like a lifetime's worth of change. I often found myself sitting on the porch of Grandpa's estate, the same place where he used to tell me stories about his younger days. The old wooden chair creaked beneath me, and the soft wind carried the smell of the fields he once worked so hard to keep alive. It was quiet, peaceful, nothing like the chaos that had filled my life before. In those moments, I could almost hear his voice again, steady and firm, saying the words that had become my guide. True wealth is measured not by what you're given, but by what you've earned. I thought back on the years of being pushed aside, overlooked, and treated like I didn't matter. For so long, betrayal was all I knew. My sister's constant gloating, my father's sharp words. It had built a wall of pain around me. But here I was, months later, holding everything they thought would always belong to them. And the strange part was, I didn't feel the need to gloat. Instead, I felt a calmness I had never known before. Grandpa hadn't just left me land and money. He had left me justice, a final act that healed wounds I thought would never close. Amanda's life changed too, but not in the way she expected. She moved into a small apartment far from the estate, away from the attention she used to crave. The friends who once laughed at her jokes and followed her lead no longer came around. She didn't call me, didn't write, didn't even try to face me again. Her silence said everything. Pride had always been her armor, but now it seemed to weigh her down more than protect her. As for my father, Richard, he couldn't bring himself to look me in the eye. For a man who once walked into every room with his head held high, he now carried himself like someone much older than his years. The loss of control over the business and estate broke something inside him. Whenever we crossed paths, his face would tighten, and he would quickly turn away. There were no apologies, no words, just bitterness and shame written in the way he carried himself. I didn't feel joy in their downfall, but I didn't feel sorrow either. I simply accepted it. Life had turned the tables without me lifting a hand. The pain they gave me for years had returned to them, not because I fought back, but because their own choices had finally caught up. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, I leaned back on that porch chair and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. For the first time, I felt free from needing their approval, free from carrying the weight of their betrayal. Sometimes revenge doesn't come from what you do. It comes from standing tall while the people who tried to break. You finally fall.